They put my chair at my brother's wedding beside the garbage bins. Know your place, he smirked. I grabbed my gift envelope and walked away. Having you here listening to me means a lot. Watch until the end and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from. I'm really curious to see how far my story is reaching. I knew I was making a mistake the moment I pulled into the country club parking lot. My hands trembled as I adjusted my navy blue dress, a dress I'd spent 2 weeks' salary on just to look like I belonged. The Rosewood Country Club stood before me, its marble columns and sprawling gardens a testament to the wealth I'd never had access to. But this was Michael's wedding day, and despite everything, he was still my brother. I gripped the cream envelope containing my gift card, a modest $200 that had required me to eat ramen for a month. The card wasn't just about the money, it was my olive branch, my desperate attempt to mend our fractured relationship. Sarah. You came. My cousin Jen's surprise was barely concealed as she intercepted me at the entrance. Her eyes darted nervously around, as if my presence was some sort of security breach. Of course I came. He's my brother, I replied, forcing a smile. Jen's expression shifted to pity. Right. Well, let me show you to your seat. I followed her through the grand ballroom, past tables adorned with elaborate flower arrangements and fine china. My parents sat at the head table, my father deep in conversation with what looked like potential clients. Neither looked up as I passed. Jen kept walking, past the family tables, past the friends section, through a set of double doors, and into a dimly lit hallway. Here we are, she said, gesturing to a lone chair positioned against the wall. Next to it stood 2 large decorative garbage bins, partially concealed by a fake ficus tree. From this spot, I wouldn't even be able to see the ceremony. There must be some mistake, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Jen wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, Sarah. This is what was on the seating chart. I stood frozen as she hurried away, leaving me alone in the service hallway. The distant sound of laughter and clinking glasses filtered through the closed doors. I don't know how long I stood there before Michael appeared, looking immaculate in his tailored tuxedo. His expression hardened when he saw me. Something wrong with your seat, he asked, his voice dripping with mock concern. Michael, I can't even see the ceremony from here. I'm your sister. Half-sister, he corrected, the word like a slap. And after you chose those people over your own family, you're lucky to have a seat at all. Those people were my clients at the social services agency where I worked, specifically the Johnson family, whom I'd helped file a complaint against one of my father's biggest corporate clients. I hadn't known about the connection until it was too late. I was doing my job, I said, the same words I'd repeated for 3 years. Michael's smile never reached his eyes. And I'm doing mine, protecting this family's reputation. Know your place, Sarah. The way he emphasized my name made it sound like a curse. I looked down at the cream envelope in my hand, then back up at my brother. In that moment, I saw us as children, building sandcastles, him teaching me to ride a bike, me helping him study for tests. Now, there was nothing but cold disdain in his eyes. Congratulations on your wedding, I said quietly, tucking the envelope into my purse. I hope you and Elise will be very happy together. I walked out of that hallway, through the grand foyer, and back to my car without looking back. As I drove away from the Rosewood Country Club, tears streamed down my face, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of sadness or rejection. They were tears of clarity. My family had shown me exactly what I meant to them. It wasn't just about a seat near garbage bins, it was about 3 years of silence, of blame, of treating me like I was disposable. The wedding was just the final confirmation of what I'd tried so hard not to see. In their eyes, I wasn't family anymore. I was an embarrassment, a disappointment, someone to hide away in service hallways. As I merged onto the highway, I made myself a promise. No more olive branches. No more desperate attempts to belong somewhere I clearly wasn't wanted. It was time to build something new. 3 days after Michael's wedding, I sat in my tiny apartment, surrounded by old photo albums I'd pulled from the back of my closet. I hadn't looked at these in years, too painful, too many reminders of what once was and what could never be again. The earliest photos showed a different life. Michael and me building a tree house with Dad, our faces smeared with dirt and beaming with pride. Mom teaching us how to bake her famous chocolate chip cookies, flour dusting our noses. Michael holding my hand on my first day of kindergarten, promising to find me at recess. We were so close once. The Golden Sinclair children with our matching dimples and stubborn chins. Everything changed when I was 13 and Michael was 15. Dad's law firm was expanding, and suddenly, Michael was being groomed as the heir apparent. Weekend fishing trips became weekend mentoring sessions. After-dinner conversations transformed into strategy discussions about corporate law and client acquisition. I'd hover at the edges, trying to contribute, but Dad would gently shoo me away. "This is man's talk, sweetheart. Why don't you help your mother with dessert?" By the time Michael left for pre-law at Yale, Dad's alma mater, the divide between us was already forming. I'd call him, eager to hear about his classes, his friends, but our conversations grew shorter, his tone more distant. When I mentioned applying to state schools for social work, he laughed. "Social work? Why would you waste your time helping people who won't help themselves?" It was the first time I realized we were becoming different people with fundamentally different values. The real break came during my senior year of college. I was interning at Eastside Community Services, working with families facing eviction. The Johnson family, a single mother with 3 children, came in desperate for help. Their landlord was kicking them out after Mrs. Johnson had complained about black mold making her youngest child sick. I helped them file a complaint and connected them with a pro bono attorney willing to fight their case. It was only after the lawsuit made local headlines that I discovered the property management company was a subsidiary of Westhill Corporation, one of my father's biggest clients. The night my father found out, he summoned me to the family home. I can still see him standing in his study, the evening light casting long shadows across the Persian rug. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he asked, his voice terrifyingly quiet. 30 years I've represented Westhill. 30 years of building trust, and you've undermined it all. "Dad, they were poisoning a child with black mold," I tried to explain. "They refused to fix it until Mrs. Johnson went public." "That's not your concern," he snapped. "Your concern should be your family. Your loyalty should be to us first." Michael stood beside our father, arms crossed, face set in stone. "You could have come to us," he said. "We could have handled it internally, quietly. But no, you had to be the savior, didn't you? Always so righteous." That night, something fractured between us that would never heal. My father made it clear, I had chosen outsiders over family. The next day, he called the director of my internship program and pulled some strings. The Johnson case was reassigned. I was moved to filing duty for the remainder of my internship. The Johnsons eventually won their case, but I wasn't there to see it. And my relationship with my family was never the same. For 3 years, I tried to rebuild those bridges. I sent birthday cards that went unacknowledged. I showed up for Christmas dinners where I was seated at the far end of the table, conversations carefully steered away from my work or life. I called my mother weekly, our conversations superficial and strained. And then came Michael's wedding invitation, addressed only to me, no +1, with a handwritten note, family only. I'd foolishly seen it as progress, as an opening. Looking at these photos now, I could trace the slow erosion of our relationship in the changing postures, the widening physical space between us in each frame. The last family photo we'd taken was at my college graduation. Michael stood a full foot away from me, his smile tight and formal, while Dad's hand rested on his shoulder. Mom and I stood on opposite sides, like bookends to a story that was already ending. I closed the album and returned it to the box. These weren't just memories, they were evidence of a slow, deliberate excommunication. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Jen, "Hope you're okay. That seating thing was messed up." I stared at the message, remembering how Jen had led me to that isolated chair without protest. She hadn't caused my humiliation, but she hadn't prevented it either, just like everyone else in my family who witnessed my gradual exclusion and did nothing. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for local therapy practices. It was time to stop fighting for a place at a table where I wasn't welcome. Time to build my own table. The Monday after Michael's wedding, I dragged myself to work at Eastside Community Services. My colleagues noticed something was off, but I deflected their concerned glances with forced smiles and vague answers about family stuff. I couldn't bring myself to explain how my own brother had seated me next to garbage bins, like I was something to be discarded. By mid-morning, my phone was buzzing with texts, not from Michael or my parents, but from extended family who'd been at the wedding. Aunt Carol, heard you made a scene and stormed out of Michael's wedding. So disrespectful. Uncle James, your mother is in tears. Happy now? Cousin Melissa, you couldn't put aside your issues for one day? It was his wedding. I stared at the messages in disbelief. Was this Michael's version of events? That I'd thrown a tantrum and stormed out, ruining his perfect day? Just as I was about to shut off my phone, it rang. My mother. Hello? I answered, my voice already tight with tension. Well, you've really outdone yourself this time, she said without preamble. Making a scene at your brother's wedding? I raised you better than that. I didn't make a scene, I replied quietly, walking to the office stairwell for privacy. I was seated next to garbage bins in a service hallway, Mom. I couldn't even see the ceremony. Don't be dramatic, Sarah. It wasn't ideal, but they had limited space. You could have made the best of it. I closed my eyes, counting to 10. Mom, Michael specifically told me to know my place. He made it very clear I wasn't wanted there. Well, what did you expect? After that Johnson mess, you're lucky to be invited at all. You could have at least stayed for the ceremony instead of running out. Her words hit me like a physical blow. In her mind, I should have been grateful for the scraps of inclusion, for being hidden away but technically present. I have to go, I said. Client meeting. I hung up before she could respond, then turned off my phone completely. I spent the rest of the day going through the motions, my body on autopilot while my mind replayed years of similar conversations, of gaslighting, minimizing, and blame shifting. That evening, I did something I should have done years ago. I called a therapist. Dr. Melissa Chen had been recommended by a colleague. Her office was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and plants dotting the bookshelves. She listened intently as I poured out everything: the wedding, the Johnson case, the years of gradual exclusion. What you're describing, she said carefully after I finished, sounds like a pattern of emotional abuse and scapegoating. Abuse? I repeated, the word feeling too harsh, too final. They're just disappointed in me. Sarah, they seated you by garbage bins at a family wedding. That's not disappointment, that's deliberate humiliation. I flinched at her directness, but couldn't argue. And it's not really about the chair, is it? She continued. It's about your refusal to accept the family narrative, that success is measured in billable hours and corporate clients, not in helping vulnerable people. Something shifted in my chest, a tight knot beginning to loosen. I've spent 3 years trying to make amends for doing my job, I whispered. For standing up for a family being poisoned by black mold. And they've spent 3 years punishing you for having values that challenge theirs, Dr. Chen replied. The question is, why do you keep seeking approval from people who have shown they only value you when you conform to their expectations? I had no answer for that. Dr. Chen assigned me some reading about family dynamics and boundaries. As I left her office, I felt simultaneously drained and lighter, like I'd set down a heavy bag I'd been carrying for years. That night, I unblocked my phone and found more messages, including one from my father. Your mother is upset. Call her and apologize. No questions about my side of the story. No concern for how I might be feeling. Just another order to fall in line. For the first time, I didn't feel the familiar rush of guilt and obligation. Instead, I felt a strange sense of calm as I typed my response. I won't be apologizing for being humiliated at Michael's wedding. I deserve better treatment than that. If Mom wants to talk, she has my number. I pressed send, then blocked all their numbers. Not forever, but for now, just long enough to hear my own thoughts without their voices drowning them out. As I lay in bed that night, I realized the wedding had given me an unexpected gift: clarity. The seat by the garbage bins wasn't just a seating arrangement, it was a metaphor for my place in the family, an unwanted presence to be hidden away, minimized, disposed of. But I wasn't garbage. And I didn't have to keep sitting in the place they'd assigned me. 2 weeks after Michael's wedding, I was starting to find my rhythm again. 3 sessions with Dr. Chen had helped me understand that my family's treatment wasn't my fault, and more importantly, it wasn't something I had to keep enduring. I'd established a temporary no-contact rule, giving myself space to heal without their constant criticism. I was reviewing case files in my office when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Hi Sarah, this is Emma, Elise's cousin from the wedding. I got your number from the guest list. Can we meet for coffee? There's something I want to talk to you about." I stared at the text, unsure how to respond. I barely remembered Emma, a tall woman with dark hair who'd smiled at me during the rehearsal dinner. Why would she want to meet now? Curiosity won out. We arranged to meet at a small cafe halfway between our offices during lunch. Emma was already waiting when I arrived, dressed in a sharp pantsuit that screamed corporate law. She stood and extended her hand, her grip firm and confident. "Thanks for meeting me," she said as we settled into a corner table. I'd been debating whether to reach out since the wedding. "Why did you?" I asked directly. Emma hesitated, stirring her latte absently. "What happened to you at the reception wasn't right. The way they put you in that hallway." She shook her head. A lot of the guests noticed, and they were uncomfortable with it. A lump formed in my throat. All this time, I'd imagined everyone at the wedding thinking I was the problem, the difficult sister who couldn't conform. The idea that others had seen the truth was both validating and painful. "It wasn't just the seating," Emma continued. "I overheard Michael and your father talking before the ceremony. Your father was worried you might cause trouble, and Michael said he'd taken care of it." She grimaced. "It was premeditated, Sarah. They deliberately humiliated you." I swallowed hard. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I know what it's like to be the family outcast. My parents disowned me when I came out in college." Her eyes held mine steadily. "And because you should know that your brother's perfect image is starting to crack." She pulled out her phone and showed me a local business news article: Sinclair and Associates under investigation for billing irregularities. "This hasn't hit the mainstream news yet," Emma explained, "but Michael's been cutting corners. Several major clients have quietly dropped the firm in the last month. There are rumors of unethical practices, padding hours, double billing." I stared at the article, a strange mix of emotions churning in my stomach. Part of me felt a vindictive satisfaction. The brother who judged me so harshly was failing to uphold his own standards. But another part felt an old, instinctive concern for him, a ghost of the protective big sister I'd once been. "Why do you care?" I asked Emma. "You barely know me." She smiled wryly. "Elise is my favorite cousin. She has no idea who she just married, and I'm worried for her. Michael presents one face to the world and another behind closed doors." "That sounds about right," I murmured. "There's something else," Emma said hesitantly. "Elise told me they're already having problems. Michael's been taking his stress out on her, nothing physical, but he's controlling, critical. She's starting to see glimpses of his true nature." I wished I could say I was surprised, but I wasn't. Michael had always been charming in public, coldly demanding in private, just like our father. "I'm sorry for her," I said sincerely. "But I don't see what I can do about it." "Nothing, really," Emma admitted. "I just thought you deserved to know that the perfect life they projected at your expense isn't so perfect after all. And..." She paused, looking slightly embarrassed. "I thought maybe you could use a friend who understands toxic family dynamics." I studied her face, searching for ulterior motives but finding none. In that moment, I realized how isolated I'd become, how I'd withdrawn from friends rather than explain my family situation, how I'd stopped dating because it meant eventually introducing someone to the Sinclairs. I could use a friend, I admitted softly. We ended up talking for nearly 2 hours. Emma told me about her own journey to build a chosen family after being rejected by her biological one. I shared stories about the clients I helped at Eastside Community Services, single mothers fighting eviction, elderly residents navigating Medicare denials, teenagers aging out of foster care. As we parted, Emma handed me a business card. I'm an employment attorney. If you ever need legal advice, or just someone to vent to, call me. For the first time since the wedding, I felt something unfamiliar stirring in my chest, hope. Not hope that my family would change or suddenly value me, but hope that I could build something meaningful without them. Later that night, I received another text from Emma. Check your email. Just sent you something interesting. The email contained a forwarded invitation to a charity gala hosted by the Bar Association, the same one my father and Michael attended every year to network with potential clients. Emma had been asked to represent her firm. Want to be my plus one? Her message read. Might be interesting to see their faces when you walk in like you belong there. I smiled at my screen. 6 months ago, I would have declined, afraid of confrontation, afraid of causing scenes. But now? Now I was done hiding in hallways. Count me in, I replied. 6 months after Michael's wedding, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. Weekly sessions with Dr. Chen had helped me establish healthy boundaries. I'd moved to a slightly larger apartment, adopted a rescue cat named Milo, and formed genuine friendships with Emma and several colleagues from work. I hadn't spoken to my family since that day. Sometimes I'd see Michael's name in local business papers, never positive coverage lately, but I'd stopped following the saga of Sinclair and Associates' decline. My focus was on building my own life, not watching theirs unravel. So when my phone rang on a crisp October morning and I saw Mom on the caller ID, my stomach clenched. I'd unblocked their numbers a month ago, part of what Dr. Chen called removing emotional barriers without lowering boundaries. Still, I hadn't expected them to actually reach out. I answered cautiously. Hello? Sarah. My mother's voice was strained. We need to talk. No greeting, no, how are you, typical. About what? In person, please. Can you come to the house tonight? Around 7? I hesitated. Dr. Chen and I had discussed how I would handle eventual contact from my family. We'd role-played scenarios, developed responses, but I still felt unprepared. Why, Mom? What's this about? She sighed, that familiar sound of disappointment. It's complicated. Your father and I would prefer to discuss it face to face. I need more than that, I insisted, my newfound backbone surprising us both. A long pause. It's about Michael. And the firm. There's been trouble. I almost laughed. From what Emma had told me, trouble was a massive understatement. The investigation into Sinclair and Associates had expanded, with rumors of evidence tampering and client fund mismanagement. I know about the investigation, I said. It's been in the papers. This is different. Please, Sarah. Just this once. Something in her voice, a crack I'd never heard before, made me agree. Fine. 7 o'clock. The family home looked exactly the same. Imposing colonial, manicured lawn, brass knocker that gleamed in the porch light. But I was different as I stood at the door, no longer the daughter desperate for approval. My father opened the door, his face grave. Sarah. Thank you for coming. He stepped aside to let me in, not attempting the awkward hug I'd expected. In the living room, my mother sat rigidly on the edge of the sofa. Beside her was Michael, looking nothing like the triumphant groom of 6 months ago. His face was haggard, eyes bloodshot, his usually impeccable appearance disheveled. I took the armchair opposite them, back straight, hands folded in my lap. I'm here. What's going on? My father cleared his throat. Michael's firm is in serious trouble. The investigation has escalated. Criminal charges, Michael muttered, not looking at me. They're talking about criminal charges now. I kept my face neutral. I'm sorry to hear that. We need your help, my mother said abruptly. I waited, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. My father shifted in his seat. You have connections in social services. Respected ones. If you could speak to the character of the firm, of your family, it could help counterbalance the negative press. I stared at him, incredulous. You want me to use my professional reputation, the one you've dismissed for years, to help Michael? We're family, my mother said, as if that explained everything. Family, I repeated slowly. Was I family when you seated me by garbage bins at Michael's wedding? When you blamed me for doing my job with the Johnson case? When you excluded me from every family event for 3 years? Michael finally looked up. Sarah, please. No, I interrupted, surprising myself with my calmness. You don't get to, Sarah, please, me now. You told me to know my place, remember? Well, I know it now. It's not here, bailing you out when you've been caught doing exactly what you accused me of, putting myself above ethical standards. It wasn't like that, Michael protested weakly. It was exactly like that, I countered. The difference is, I stood up for people being poisoned by black mold. You cut corners to make more money. My father leaned forward. Sarah, whatever grievances you have. They're not grievances, Dad. They're wounds. Ones you all inflicted deliberately and repeatedly. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I'm not going to help you clean up this mess. Not because I want revenge, but because it would compromise my own ethics to do so. So that's it? My mother's voice trembled. You're abandoning your family when we need you most? The irony was so thick I almost choked on it. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm refusing to be used by people who only remember I exist when they need something from me. As I headed for the door, Michael called after me, desperation edging his voice. Sarah, please. They're looking at jail time. Dad could lose his license. I paused, hand on the doorknob. You know what the saddest part is? If you'd ever treated me like actual family, if you'd respected me, my work, my values, I would have tried to help you despite everything. That's who I am. I opened the door, letting in the cool evening air. But you never wanted my help before. You wanted my silence, my compliance, my erasure. And now you know exactly how that feels. The door closed behind me with quiet finality. As I walked to my car, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time, I'd faced my family not as the desperate daughter seeking approval, but as a woman standing in her own power. They hadn't changed. But I had. 1 year to the day after Michael's wedding, I stood in my kitchen arranging a vegetable platter for my dinner party. The apartment was filled with the aroma of roasting chicken and fresh bread, punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter from the living room where my guests were already gathering. Need any help? Emma poked her head into the kitchen, wine glass in hand. Just grab that cheese plate, I said, nodding toward the counter. The past year had been transformative. After rejecting my family's plea for help, I'd thrown myself into building a life that reflected my values. I'd been promoted to senior case manager at Eastside Community Services and had started a support group for adults dealing with family estrangement, something I now recognized was far more common than I'd realized. My friendship with Emma had deepened into a genuine bond. Through her, I'd met other people who understood what it meant to create boundaries with toxic family members. We'd formed a tight-knit circle, not replacement siblings or parents, but something equally meaningful, chosen family. Tonight's dinner party was celebrating both my promotion and the launch of our community outreach program for families facing housing instability. My small apartment was filled with colleagues, friends, and a few former clients whose lives had stabilized enough that we could now call each other friends. As I carried the veggie tray to the living room, I looked around at the faces of people who genuinely cared about me, who valued me not for my family name or my willingness to conform, but for exactly who I was. Dr. Chen, who'd become a mentor as well as my therapist, raised her glass in a small toast as I passed. "Proud of you," she mouthed silently. The doorbell rang just as I set down the platter. "I'll get it," I called, assuming it was my neighbor Jasmine, who'd promised to stop by after her shift at the hospital. But when I opened the door, it wasn't Jasmine standing there. It was my father. He looked smaller somehow, his shoulders slightly stooped, his hair grayer than I remembered. He wore no tie, and his usual confident posture was replaced by something I'd never seen in him before, uncertainty. "Sarah," he said softly, almost a whisper. I stood frozen in the doorway, acutely aware of the party continuing behind me, oblivious to the earthquake happening at my threshold. "Dad. What are you doing here?" He shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't sure you'd see me if I called first." "I'm in the middle of hosting a dinner party," I said, gesturing vaguely behind me. "I can come back another time," he offered, already turning to leave. Something in his defeated posture made me hesitate. "Wait. What's going on? Is everyone okay?" He nodded quickly. Yes. Your mother is fine. Michael is." He paused. "Michael is dealing with the consequences of his choices." I'd heard through Emma that Michael had taken a plea deal, no jail time, but disbarment and community service. "That doesn't explain why you're here," I said. My father looked down at his hands, strong hands that had never shown weakness before. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About what you said that night. About how we treated you." He took a deep breath. "You were right, Sarah. About all of it." I leaned against the doorframe, stunned by words I never expected to hear. "For what it's worth," he continued, "I am deeply, truly sorry. Not just for the wedding, but for everything before it. For dismissing your work, your values. For not standing up for you after the Johnson case." His voice cracked slightly. "For not being the father you deserved." Emotion welled in my throat, but I swallowed it down. "Why now, Dad? After all this time?" "Because I finally realized what I've lost." His eyes met mine directly. "Not the firm, not the reputation, not the money, but you. My daughter. The best of us, really." I almost scoffed at that, but the naked sincerity in his face stopped me. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know that I see you now, Sarah. I see the incredible woman you've become, not despite our rejection, but because you had the courage to stand for what you believe in." He took a step back. "I'll go now. Let you get back to your party." "Wait," I said, surprising myself. Would you like to come in? Just for a minute?" He looked stunned. "Are you sure?" I wasn't, not really. But something Dr. Chen had said in our last session echoed in my mind. Forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about not letting it control your future. I nodded and stepped aside. As my father entered my apartment, I saw it through his eyes, the mismatched furniture, the walls covered with local art, the diverse group of people laughing and talking. Nothing like the austere, carefully curated world of the Sinclairs. But warm. Alive. Real. Emma approached, curiosity in her eyes. "Sarah?" "Emma, this is my father, Richard Sinclair," I said, the words feeling strange on my tongue. "Dad, this is my friend Emma." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Sinclair," Emma said, her tone cautious but polite. My father extended his hand. "Richard, please. And it's a pleasure to meet any friend of Sarah's." I led him through the party, introducing him simply as my father, watching as he engaged with my world for the first time. He listened attentively as my colleague Miguel explained our housing initiative. He asked thoughtful questions when Danielle, a former client, described her journey from homelessness to homeownership. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, my father helped clear plates without being asked, something I'd never seen him do in his own home. "Your friends are remarkable people," he said as we stood in the kitchen. "I can see why you've built your life with them." I nodded. They accept me for who I am. That's all I want now, too, he said quietly. Not to reclaim the past, but maybe, to be part of your future. If you'll allow it. I didn't answer immediately, but handed him a plate to dry. We worked in companionable silence for a few minutes. One step at a time, Dad, I finally said. This is a start. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't the fantasy reconciliation I'd once dreamed of. It was something more real, more honest, a cautious opening, a seat at a table where no one had to sit by the garbage bins. A chance to build something new.